So I've given this a bit of a title. It might sound a bit foreboding, actually, the title, but I've called it "Suffering from." What did I call it? I've forgotten. Something, something like "Suffering from Denial to Embrace," something like that. You get the story, or you will get the story anyway. Oscar, could you give me a wave after 10 minutes and then after 15 minutes, please, just so that I know if I need to go up again. So the talk's going to be in 4 parts. So firstly, I'm going to talk about my early experience with suffering, the early suffering that I experienced. Then I'm going to talk about the effect that had on me as a young man entering into adulthood. I'm then going to talk about my early experiences with Buddhism. And then I'll talk about where I'm at now. And I'm going to use a poem. So I'm going to use a poem by an amazing poet called Louise Gluck, who's just won the Nobel Prize, actually. And she's incredible. And so this poem's in 3 parts, and so I'll drop in a part every now and then. So yeah, firstly, early experience. So I think I've always been someone who feels things quite strongly. I think I've always had quite a strong introspective side to myself. And yeah, I think life's always felt quite serious to me. So yeah, I think that means that I do experience the highs quite strongly as well as the lows quite strongly. But I think that also, I felt quite different because of that when I was like a young boy. I noticed that I did feel things more strongly. I seemed to think about things a lot more than a lot of my friends. So yeah, that was an early experience. But then I feel like the kind of most strong experiences of suffering started when I was about 11 and I went to high school. And I remember there was some kind of like exam that you did when I went to high school anyway. And I remember looking around the exam hall and like clocking another boy in my year and being like, oh my God, I find him attractive. And my response was just like, shit, this isn't good. And yeah, even though I don't really remember much kind of homophobia there's like casual stuff in the house and stuff, but nothing that much. But yeah, my response was just like, uh-oh. And I tried to convince myself it wasn't true. Yeah, it was just like denial. And that continued like all throughout my teenage years. And yeah, I hid a lot of myself from other people, really. Yeah, I was really scared that I'd be discovered by my friends, one of whom I was in love with, so that wasn't easy. Yeah, so I felt quite separate from that. And I know that's not that uncommon. Yeah. But then when I was 16, my mum died. So she passed away very suddenly. So she went to bed with a headache one night and she died overnight. And all of a sudden, my life was just flipped upside down. Yeah, and it's quite hard. In a way, I'm still working out what that is. In a way, well, you'll hear, my life's kind of about that. But yeah, it's really hard to explain if you've not experienced that, what it's like, that all of a sudden, it was just like I was in a different world. It was really strange. And yeah, this is where the first part of the poem comes in, because it can do better than mere words kind of explaining this situation. So the poem's called Echoes. Once I could imagine my soul, I could imagine my death. When I imagined my death, my soul died. This I remember clearly. My body persisted, not thrived, but persisted. Why, I do not know. Yeah. So that moves us on to the second part, which is the situation after my mum died. So like I said, I was 16, and yeah, all of my friends hadn't had anything like that happen. I was the only person in my friendship groups that had a loss like that. Unfortunately, my dad wasn't around at the time. And my family, I lived with my sister and then my brother, but they were in their own stuff. They were, dealing with grief as well. And so I felt quite alone at that time. And I was alone with, issues, like existential issues. Like my mum's death, like I said, it turned my world upside down. And I was trying to work out, well, what the hell's life about then if that can happen? And it's genetic as well. So it made me think about my own lifespan and that, I might live to an old age, but I might not. So I was left with these big questions, and I didn't have the resources, external or internal, to deal with it. And so I called it an opening awareness or an emerging awareness of the fact of life, of the existential situation. And I tried to destroy it. I just tried to push it away. It made me different. And I thought, I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to look at this. Also, I didn't have the resources to deal with it as well. And then 5 years after my mum died, I gratefully went through the doors of the Manchester Buddhist Centre, which is the best thing I've ever done. Suddenly I was in a context where I could talk about the deeper things in life. I could talk about death, other people who'd experienced things like that. And yeah, people were talking about what's life about, what's suffering about, what's it all about. But it feels like there was a kind of two-pronged approach to my Buddhist practice. So there was, the fact that I could look at this stuff and talk about this stuff finally. But there was still a lot of me that wanted to get away from it. It still felt a little bit different. And in a way, I wanted to get away from that still. And yeah, my early experience of Buddhism was incredible. Like the first meditation it just felt like something opened up. And yeah, that continued to happen. And I think that while that was incredibly positive, I think I also started to use that to escape. I thought, if I can have enough bliss, if I can be wise enough, then I can get away from that past. I can escape it. I can get around it. And in January 2018, I moved to Padmaloka Retreat Centre, which Oscar mentioned earlier, and had 2 really amazing years there. It's a really beautiful place. I was living with some really great people, and again, I learned a lot, and I was encouraged by people there to look at this area of suffering, to look at my mum's death. But again, there was a part of me that thought, okay, I'm out. I've escaped. I've got this new life, and I can just leave the past behind. And yeah, this leads on to the second part of the poem. When I was still very young, My parents moved to a small valley surrounded by mountains in what was called Lake Country. From our kitchen garden, you could see the mountains, snow-covered even in summer. I remember peace of a kind I never knew again. Somewhat later, I took it upon myself to become an artist, to give voice to these impressions. Thank you. And so my time at Pabaloka at the retreat centre was going so well, and I'm training for ordination, and I was invited to be ordained. And the plan was that I would be ordained in April of this year. And in November of last year, I went on a solitary retreat for 2 weeks. And yeah, the plan was start thinking about ordination. It's a preparation for ordination. But actually what happened was I saw on that retreat how much of my energy was going towards trying to avoid my past, trying to disavow my past. And yeah, so much of me was invested in just trying to escape. And it was causing me a huge amount of, well, unnecessary suffering. And so I realized that I needed to turn towards this, that if I wanted to continue living a meaningful life, I need to look this stuff in the face. And that meant moving away from the retreat centre that I loved. It meant coming back to Manchester and yeah, really looking at this stuff, which I'm doing in a variety of ways. And yeah, that brings us on to the third part of the poem. The rest I have told you already. A few years of fluency, and then the long silence, like the silence in the valley, before the mountains send back your own voice, changed to the voice of nature. This silence is my companion now. I ask, of what did my soul die? And the silence answers, if your soul died, whose life are you living? And when did you become that person? And so what that poem says to me is that when we turn towards our life, our experience, our suffering, something else, you could even say a new being comes through. And just a disclaimer, so she talks about soul, and I'd just like to encourage you to take that poetically. Yeah. And so, yeah, when we turn towards our suffering, something else comes through. And there's a teaching in Buddhism. So one of the 3 characteristics of existence, of life, is that there is suffering. There is suffering in life. That, yeah, there's always a bit of grit in the oyster. There's an image of a cartwheel that's not quite round, so it's slightly clunky, and that's inherent in life. We all experience that. And if we embrace that, if we really turn towards that suffering in life, it turns into a doorway. And the doorway is what you go into is called the unbiased. And the best way to talk about the unbiased is to use an image. It's a traditional image, but I'd like to show you something. So this is my birthday present from Oscar, which is so beautiful. I love it. So the image for the unbiased, the doorway that you go through when you embrace suffering, is of a perfectly round sphere on a perfectly flat surface. And so whichever way life blows it, it just rolls. It just goes that way and it's fine. And why I love this as well is because it's incredibly beautiful. And I think when we do embrace our suffering and go through that doorway, yeah, just incredible beauty emerges. Thank you. And so, yeah, when we allow life to be as it is, incredible richness and beauty does open up. And that's my experience, that as I've turned towards the suffering and the existential questions that have opened up through my life, yeah, an incredible richness has opened up. And it's also opened up a connection with others that I hadn't experienced before. And that I find that as I turn more and more towards this, that, well, even though we all experience things in different ways and we've got different life experiences, this is something that actually unites us. And I do find that as I turn more and more towards this, yeah, I connect with others in an incredibly beautiful way. And I think my friendship with Oscar's a really good example of that. And we stop resisting life. We allow life to be as it is. And I'd like to finish with a poem by Sangharakshita. And this poem seems to keep coming to me at the moment. I keep seeing it everywhere. It's really mysterious. And I've been thinking recently, anyway, this is what my life's about. It's called Life is King. Hour after hour, day after day, we try to grasp the ungraspable, pinpoint the unpredictable. Flowers wither when touched. Ice suddenly cracks beneath our feet. Vainly, we try to track bird flight through the sky, trace dumb fish through deep water. Try to anticipate the earned smile, the soft reward, even try to grasp our own lives. But life slips through our fingers like snow. Life cannot belong to us. We belong to life. Life is king. Thank you.